Well, good morning, Mr. Keith. How's it going this fine Monday morning here?
Monday morning?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're supposed to be more in the moment.
All right. Well, yeah, I like being in the moment with you, John.
Oh, that's creepy on many levels. I mean, it's fitting for the season. I mean, it's moderately disturbing, but you know what is this week?
Halloween?
Indeed.
It's time to hit the trail, lock in those hubs, and throw it into low range. Because you are listening to Wheelin' with Keith and Johnny Orange, broadcasting from the Thin Line Off-Road Studio. They're here to talk about 4x4s, trucks, and everything to do with enjoying the great outdoors. Buckle up. Here's your hosts, Keith and Johnny Orange.
You going trick-or-treating, John?
Nah, I don't really do that. I'm a little too old for that.
You're never too old for trick. It's free candy, dude.
I mean, I was seeing a thing on Facebook. Somebody put out an alert to find one where they're giving away tacos and margaritas.
I'm in.
Yeah,
I'm in.
Absolutely. Anybody who knows of a town doing that, let us know, please.
Yeah. You gonna get dressed up or anything?
No. See, I've got a Halloween party I'm supposed to go to. It's actually after Halloween. Oh, crap. That's this weekend. Huh. Anyways, yeah, I don't know if I can pull the same costume off again or not. I've used it 2 years in a row, so this would be the third year, but it's only my second year at this party, so I don't know if I can cheat and use it again or not.
You always modify it. Remember Marge Simpson in The Simpsons, where she got the that suit from it was like a Chanel suit she got at a thrift store, and she modifies it like 18 times so she could go to different parties with it.
Nice. I did not remember that one.
Yeah, well, okay, so what did you go as?
Prison jumpsuit.
Oh, perfect.
So, I mean, I suppose I could add blood and go as a zombie prisoner.
Okay, yeah, you could do that.
Interesting.
Get some handcuffs that are cut off or something.
Yeah.
Get you an old bus to drive around.
I don't know about that. I mean, this party's in a basement.
I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to get like an old short bus and paint it like a dark blue or silver or something. Put some bars in the windows and drive around in a jumpsuit.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Okay, man. So we haven't even talked cars here.
We talked about a bus.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. What have your adventures? Well, let's roll into kind of our news. What have your adventures been this week?
Well, I bought a nice high-performance set of shocks for the Pegasus because her shocks are blown. They ended up being way, way longer than I thought they were.
Yeah.
I just going by numbers charts of what it should be and what these were, and they should have worked. Yeah, don't do that. Take some actual measurements before you do that.
How was Wish with the return policy?
It was Facebook Marketplace and an hour and a half drive to where the guy was, so obviously I'm not going to do that. And then I had a spare set of shocks from another project I parted out. And those don't fit either.
That's not good.
No, and in messing with removing one of the old shocks to take some measurements and everything, the ones on it are completely shot.
Oh, okay.
It's not good. I'm pretty sure I've worn the coils out a little bit.
Well, you get it figured out, dude.
Oh, yeah, I found another set on Marketplace. These ones I've taken actual measurements, and what these are, they'll work. I just got to drive to Holly to get them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were a little bit on my, my list today, or list this week.
Good list or bad list?
My bad list.
What'd I do?
Well, you remember when you drove Project Excursion back from Detroit with me?
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I think you have a wheel bearing going out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I don't need it. I don't need this right now, John. I don't have a wheel bearing going out.
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm driving Project Excursion home from work the other day, and I stop at a stoplight, and I mean, no warning whatsoever. It just sounds like, brakes grinding, just
Howling Banshee.
really bad, Not the wheel, so I'm like, man, this is brakes again. I did them like a year ago, but I put a lot of miles on, so I get it home and I get the calipers off and the pads are just gone.
Oof.
And it's like I had no squealers on them, so there was like no warning.
Yeah.
And realized that my passenger front wheel bearing, I could back and forth about half an inch. So yeah, fortunately,
I'm sorry.
I had a spare one in the garage, but I was cursing your
lucky.
name the whole time.
I believe it. I believe it.
So,
I'm sorry.
It did sound like a howling banshee. But,
Yeah.
Well, we still haven't really gotten into a topic besides Halloween. I was thinking on this episode talking about a couple different things. I know you and I were, before the episode talking about what we would do. And you have any automotive gremlin stories or anything like that? Or ghost stories?
Oof.
All right. I got a few. I'll start us off with one.
Okay.
And this is more of a gremlin story, okay? So I'm working at the car dealership, the Chevy dealership, back in the late 90s as a young apprentice mechanic. And we sold, I'd say it wasn't Chevy, it was GMC, Cadillac, Buick. I think it was everything but Chevy. But anyways,
nice.
We had sold a brand new pickup truck or SUV. I don't even remember what model it was now. We'd sold something brand spanking new. Owner comes back like 3 days later and says, there is something wrong with this car. And we're like, well, what do you mean there's something wrong with this car, man? And it was actually a lady, so not man, but lady says there's something wrong with this car. And well, what's wrong? And she's like, 1, it smells like rotting garbage. 2, it makes this awful noise whenever I turn on the heater. We're like, okay, so, and mind you, this car is brand new.
Yeah.
So we get in, turn on first of all, get in the car, and yeah, it smells pretty bad. Not like bad, but you could definitely, there was a funky odor to it. And we turn on the heater, and sure enough, you hear this like ding, 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 and it's kind of almost like, ghost chains clanging kind of sound. We're like, okay, we're going to take a look at this thing. So she leaves. And this wasn't one that I was working on. One of the other mechanics was, but he starts taking the dashboard apart and, messing with this thing and trying to figure out what is making the sound because it was coming from the dashboard. And he figured maybe the smell thing was related. He wasn't sure. And so he digs this whole thing apart and finally gets to the point where he's got the whole dashboard out and he has the whole HVAC system, the heater core and everything pulled apart, opens up the heater box, and inside the heater box of this brand spanking new car is a pop can and a rotted banana with a note shoved in the pop can that says, bet you had a hard time finding this one.
Awesome.
Right from the line, right from the General Motors line.
That is awesome.
I'm thinking somebody was a little disgruntled that day.
Yeah, I would think so.
So nothing scary, nothing too.
I don't know, healthy food.
What's that?
Healthy food, a banana.
Yeah, a very, very rotted banana was in there.
It's horrible. That is.
Can you imagine spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for a brand new vehicle only to have that kind of stuff happen?
I'd have been pissed.
Oh, she was.
I believe it.
Yeah, it was. But the note there, that
is awesome. That's pretty cool.
Somebody had some spite there.
Yeah.
Other ones. What kind of? You don't have any. I figured you would.
Not so much on the cars. I mean, I've had problems that I've just chased.
Okay.
I mean, the coolant leak issue I kept having on Pegasus when I first got her done. Mm-hmm. And I chased every hose clamp. I thought maybe, one of the hoses was expanding when it was hot. So I got a smaller hose. Okay. Thinking that'd be, tighter fitting on everything, so no leak, right? Yeah, same problem. So I kept going and going, and it turned out it was the hose clamps I was using. So I got rid of those. I got different hose clamps, better, really expensive ones. That stopped almost all of the problem, except then I found out my radiator was leaking. So I replaced the radiator, and so far everything's been okay.
Chasing the old coolant gremlin. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of non-automotive related stories.
Well, do you? You got anything that's really good that crosses over for Halloween?
Well, yeah, a little bit. This was on a dive out in Lake Erie a few years ago. It was a 150-foot dive, and we get down the boat. It was a shipwreck we were diving on, and the boat had burned and sank. Actually recorded, 150 people died when the boat sank. At the time, the year that it sank, there's a lot of immigrants on that boat that used to be stowed below decks illegally.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So they figure the actual number is closer to 300 people.
Ooh.
Yeah. And there was a group of about 20 of us that were on this trip. This was our second dive of the day. And we got down, and, the visibility there, you couldn't see very far. So we all tied reels off, so we had a line to get back to the surface line, and we went. And I think the furthest anybody made it was about 40, 50 feet. Everybody you got a weird feeling. Every single one of us, nobody could explain it. Just something wasn't right. Something didn't feel right. Everything was kind of blurry the whole dive.
Okay.
So we all called it and went up early. I think the longest dive was in like 12 minutes.
So nobody went down and saw the shipwreck?
No, we were on the wreck.
Oh.
We got to the bottom, we looked around, and it was just, nothing felt right. Everything felt weird and off and just uncomfortable. It was the weirdest feeling I've ever had.
You superstitious like that, are you a little bit?
I mean, I believe there's something else out there.
Oh, okay. All right.
But it was just weird, man. I mean, I've been, pitch black waters in Lake Superior. I could see daylight. I've been deeper than this. I've been down longer than that. I've been on older wrecks. I've seen, things that I know are human remains and nothing. Just something wasn't right.
Just spooked you out.
Yeah. It was the weirdest thing. And it wasn't just me. It was all of us. There were 3 of us in our group, and there were 17 other divers.
Okay.
And it hit everybody.
Huh.
Whatever it was like something didn't want us to be there.
All right.
So we left.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it. Sometimes something just doesn't seem right to you.
Oh, yeah.
Some people doesn't bother as much. Years ago, I don't know if I may have even told you the story on the podcast. If I did, I apologize to our listeners. If it was way back, it's been a while. Maybe I told you about this before, but I was looking at a Suzuki Samurai for sale once, and it was outside of the road for sale. Mint condition looking little thing. Beautiful body, beautiful interior. It says right on there, engine knocks. So call the number. Guys are, yep, gave me a pretty smoking deal for a clean Sammy with a bad engine. Still ran, just knocked.
Yeah.
We're talking for a few minutes, and the guy says to me, well, do you want the parts rig? And I says, want the parts rig? Well, what do you got? He said, well, I'll show you. So we go around the back of his house, and here is another Samurai that's pretty crushed up and bent up and whatnot. And the whole targa bar and the windshield frame is all bent over. And I'm looking at this thing, and I go, okay. I said, what do you want for it? He says, you can just have it. And I said, what do you mean just have it? And he goes, yeah, it wouldn't feel right to me to sell this thing. And I says, okay, what wouldn't feel right? What do you mean? And he says, well, the previous owner rolled it and was decapitated in it.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
Yeah. And there was bits of hair and blood on the dashboard. And
fun.
And so he just handed me the title and the keys, and I took it home, and that ended up having a great engine in it. And I ended up turning that rig into an off-road rig. And the few people I told, I had a few buddies that rode that thing, and they're like, this doesn't feel right to me. And it's like, it never really bothered me, but it was, some people just didn't get it.
I know a lot of that superstition follows with divers, and when someone passes away with gear, they won't go anywhere near
stuff.
No dive gear.
Oh, okay.
Using regulators or tanks or something like that.
Okay.
I have a tank that I use from a gentleman I know passed away, and that was the tank he was using. It was not a dive related accident.
Okay.
But I mean, it's equipment. It's inanimate. I'm all right with it.
Well, that's kind of how I feel about
Clean
things.
it up. If it's something that was breathed on, sanitize it, new mouthpiece, and go.
Sure. I bet we're getting towards break time. But I just thought of another story it's not really automotive related, but it's in a way. This is going to be a fun episode, John.
I like it.
All right. Why don't we come back in a minute? I'll tell you about that.
Sounds good. See you in a bit.
Hey, it sounds like it's time to swap out that old engine for something better, John.
Yeah, man, but I have so much into my trans and transfer case setup already. I don't want to change those too.
Sounds like you need to call Quick Draw Brand Adapters. They specialize in conversion bell housings for nearly all diesel and gasoline engines, including the new 2.8R Cummins.
I like weird engines. I want something different.
Then you definitely need to visit QuickDrawBrand.com today. They have those hard-to-find parts. They also have used diesel engines available. You can call them at 513-446-9654.
Cool, I'll do that. See what they have. Thanks.
All right, welcome back, John. Before I tell you the next story I was going to tell you about, I got thinking that we might have some shout-outs, things like that. I did want to give a shout out to a gentleman from one of our other episodes, Mr. Patrick Rowe. I think he is one of our Patreon sponsors, maybe $10 level guy. Speaking of which, if you are interested in signing up on Patreon, you get a whole other show. You get the End of the Trail show. We've said before it's a little more laid back. It's maybe not as technical. We still talk trucks a lot of times. Go patreon.com, look up Wheelin, WHEELIN. For as little as $2 a month, you can get a whole nother show if you like Wheelin. But back to Patrick Rowe here. He listened to our safety and security episode that we were talking about vehicular security, and he had mentioned this. He messaged us this. He says, so I listened to your episodes on my 2 weeks of work. I work 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off for the oil field here in Alaska. Later on episode 25, y'all were talking about how to protect vehicles. I was going to share that I use Logistomatics tracking device. It can be put just about anywhere. Real-time tracking and geofence alerts if the vehicle leaves an area. For example, if my Jeep leaves a 300-foot radius, you can expand the area at any time of my house. It alerts my iPhone and watch. Same with my work. If it leaves my work, alarms my phone. It is totally silent in the Jeep, but I can listen into them the whole time. It's relatively inexpensive, $14 a month, and the tracker is a one-time fee. They have a few different kinds, and the price varies.
That's awesome.
I think that's a really cool thing to know. So $14 a month if you want to practice, if you want to make your rig a little more secure for this silent thing. And like you said, there's actually a device in it that listens too.
That's cool.
So
I like
that. Back to when we had our issue with that would have been kind of a cool thing to have. So hey, Patrick, thank you so much for
I wonder if you can talk to them through that, because it'd be really fun to screw with people.
Patrick, go on 4x4 Talk and tell us more about this.
Oh, please do. Definitely interested to hear more.
We would like to hear more about this. So, anyways, so John, Halloween time, you get all these spooky type things, and I'm wondering, do you believe in extraterrestrials?
Well, yeah, of course.
You do?
Well, yeah. I mean, they're out there.
Okay. All right.
I'm sure of that.
Yeah, I am too. Do you think they've ever been to Earth?
Yeah. I don't know why, but...
Okay, all right. So you're not going to call me crazy.
Nah,
Once
have
again,
you seen the people here?
You've heard so many of my stories over the years. And this is a story, though, that I've not told a lot of people, because usually when I tell people, they roll their eyes at me. Okay. So years ago, I'm driving home from a party, but I hadn't been drinking or anything like that. I'm driving home. I've
seen this movie. You saw a set of bright headlights behind you. They went up and came over. You looked out, got sunburned on half your face.
Kind of. No. Anyways, so I'm driving home.
Started playing with your mashed potatoes the next day.
Very rural. Oh, my God. making what is that, Devil's Tower?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Great
Excellent movie. Yes.
Absolutely.
All right, yes. So I'm driving home, and rural area, middle of nowhere. And I'm going down the road, and this is way before cell phones. This is way before, carrying cameras or anything with you. I really wish I would have had something. And this is, in fact, I could actually tell you the date by Googling it, and I'll tell you why in just a minute.
Okay.
But late 90s, and I look up into the sky right above the road, and I see something that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Okay.
This thing it's only 200 or 300 feet off the ground. There is what looks like a giant hovering yield sign. This thing is triangular, rounded corners, big old white bulb things that looked like a push light to me. Like, those push lights you put in a closet? There's one at each corner. And my guess, this thing's probably 200 feet long and maybe about 20 feet wide. And it's just sitting there, and it's not moving.
Nice.
And I'm like, okay. So I literally pull my truck over, and I get out of my truck, and I get up onto the hood of my truck, and I'm just standing there and sitting on my hood, and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, what am I looking at?
What did I have at that party?
Yeah, pretty much, exactly. And I'm going,
I should not be driving.
And it's not making any noise. And I watch it, it's just sitting there for a minute, and then all of a sudden it just starts to move, almost like something sliding slowly on ice. And it just goes along and goes along. And I followed it for a little bit. And I say a little bit, probably half an hour or so. And then it finally kind of got to a wooded area and it just kept going over. And I eventually lost sight of it. And I don't want to say I got bored of it, but I kind of did. It was like, it's not doing anything.
Yeah.
So no, I never saw any little green men or anything like that. But my theory behind it is that I saw some sort of top secret U.S. aircraft that we don't know about. I mean,
ultimate off-road vehicle.
yeah, exactly.
Hovering yield sign.
Yeah, off-roading on Mars. You know,
I love it.
I think it was some sort of government surveillance thing or something. I got no idea. I don't think it was aliens. I really don't, because it looked man-made to me. But I mean, you figure the Blackbird plane and the stealth plane existed for 20 years before the public knew. So
I mean, I know a guy from Craigslist we could ask. He's probably got all kinds of specs and blueprints for it.
you know, a guy from Craigslist that can tell you about secret government things. I'm not sure I trust this.
Yeah.
So once again, not a ghost story
deal.
or anything there, but it was definitely an interesting point in my life. And, you know, so when people say, have you ever seen a UFO? Okay, yeah. So it was unidentified. It was flying technically.
There's some weird stuff that moves too fast in the skies before.
Yeah.
Well, we had one. It's not really an alien thing. It was actually a pretty unsettling night. My buddy's a firefighter. And we were out at a big bonfire barn party at a friend's house, and we're heading back towards his house.
You're burning a barn?
No. Bonfire and barn party.
Oh, okay.
Yes, both.
Okay.
And we're heading back, and we're going, we'll just say, exceptionally fast down this back road. And there's this dude just walking down the road. I mean, this is the middle of nowhere. There's fields on all sides. It was very unsettling. And both of us are kind of like, something's not right here. You know, let's go see if that guy is okay. I mean, he looked. Something wasn't right. And we stopped, we turned around, and we went back, and we couldn't find him again.
That is weird.
I mean, at that point, we got concerned. He's like, what happened here? I mean, we spent probably 15 minutes trying to find this guy. There's open fields. There's nowhere he could have gone. We looked in all the ditches and anywhere he could have been, and we never found him. Don't know what happened.
That is weird.
It was very unsettling.
That actually reminds me of one more, and this is a little bit of an off-roading thing, of one more that I saw. So years and years ago, probably 10, 15 years ago, maybe even more than that, I'm driving down the road locally here at night, back road, dirt road. And it's dark. I don't want to say middle of the night, but I mean, it's dark out.
Yeah.
And it's one of those fall nights where it's kind of foggy. So everything's kind of spooky, you know? So it's got that just, you know, that there's that feel in the air. You know what I'm talking about? Where there's
it's so unsettling.
Yeah. And I go around the corner on this country road, and I smack dab into a Civil War soldier. Full on Civil War dress on a horse. So off-road vehicle.
And
see?
what time of day was this?
Middle of the night.
Okay.
So yeah, a horse is an off-road vehicle, right?
I mean, it counts.
Okay.
It's measured in 1 horsepower
and
units.
he's just riding down the side of the road, full on Civil War dress in the dark. And I'm like, and I look and I'm just like, okay. And this is not around Halloween. This is like maybe either early October or November
Had
or
you
something.
left a party just before this one?
No, I hadn't. And so
I got to start partying with you, man.
so this creeped me out. I didn't follow him or anything. I was just like, and I passed him, and it was just like one of those things where, like, you know, the fog was like rolling around, and you can just picture it, you know. Like So I go by real slow because horseback riders, I would always, you know, always slow down and courtesy. So I get home and I'm telling my folks about this, and I'm like, this is the weirdest thing. And my mom's like, oh, that's so and so. Your sister used to date him.
Okay.
I'm like,
wow.
I'm like, whoa. I'm like, what do you mean? And she goes, yeah, he had an accident and he's a little odd, and he rides around his horse sometimes at night dressed as a Civil War soldier. And I'm like, you're screwing with me. I'm like,
I mean, just to screw with people, or is there a reason?
I don't. It's not just night. It ended up being daytime. I saw him probably a dozen more times over the next year or two, different places. But I mean, that's the first time I saw him.
Yeah, it'd be a little creepy.
Yeah, and here's this dude, the Civil War soldier, and And I'm just like, okay, yeah, that was a little odd. So
Yeah, I would say
this
so.
is the weirdest episode of Wheelin' ever.
Yeah.
You want to talk about some truck stuff?
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's a little bit Halloween related. How do you bring one of them back from the dead?
Oh, yeah, bring it back from the dead.
Yeah.
What you mean, and this is something we talked about prior to the episode, of course, is, if you get a vehicle, car, truck, 4x4, whatever, and let's say you found something that has been parked in the woods or barn or backyard for 20 or 30 years or less, but, long time. So it's really, dead.
Yeah.
How do you get this thing going? Providing the body and frame are decent, how would you get it going again?
That's always a good one. I mean, it depends where you're going to start. Are you going to work on it in place or move it first? Obviously, if you're moving it, tires and brakes.
Yeah.
You got to start with that.
So something I learned, because I've rescued a lot of old vehicles like that over the years, is you go out, tools, bring a jack with you, bring lug wrenches.
Penetrating oil.
A big old
torch.
hammer. Big old hammer.
Yeah.
Torch helps, but
Yeah.
like a 3 or 4 pound hand sledge to get drum brakes and disc brakes
I've watched
freed
you
up.
do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, beat those box trucks we drove back from Grand Rapids. Had to beat the drums to break the brakes loose on a couple of them.
Oh, I didn't remember that. Yeah. But they're almost always, drum brakes especially, are almost always seized up.
That's another reason I hate drums.
Disc will do it too.
Oh,
Disc
yeah.
will do it too.
Yeah,
So,
I have seen that happen.
all right. So you get the thing dragged up and out. And, at that point, you also need to look at what are the condition of the tires.
Oh,
Are
yeah.
they off the rim? Are they rotted off the rim?
Yeah.
Are they still there and flat?
Yeah.
If they're still there and flat, of course, you might want to try airing them up, but be cautious.
Yeah, if they're dry rotted and you don't realize it, they can blow out.
I had that happen. 51 Chevy that was buried up halfway to the door handles. Doug actually had to dig the car out. Got a chain on it, pulled it out. The tires were looking okay. Actually brought it home on those tires. They were half flat. We aired them up a little bit with an air tank. Went to go air up one all the way, and the whole sidewall split. Just knocked me right on my butt. Fortunately, nothing in my eyes. Didn't
That's
hurt.
lucky.
Just split that whole thing. It was loud too.
Oh, yeah. I got to watch a friend of mine. It wasn't really air pressure, but I've never actually seen the whole, he used starter fluid and a torch thing to reseat a tire bead. Yeah, that tire blew out a sidewall when we did that, and he barely used any fluid. It was just that bad of a tire.
That's not good.
No, I got it on video. It's pretty sweet.
Well, okay, there you go. Let's use my old 51 Chevy as an example.
Okay.
Of bringing one back from the dead.
Sounds good.
Thinking about that. So that was the first part of it. This was something I bought from like $200 from my neighbor who told me about this car for years, and I didn't know it was. Yeah, I was like, well, let me go see it, and he was like, oh, some other time. I was thought it doesn't exist. One day he just finally came over and was like, give me $200. The Chevy's yours.
Sweet.
Bought it sight unseen.
Nice.
Went back there
Done
and here's this 51 Chevy buried up to the middle of the grill in the backyard. It had sunk down in mucky dirt. Dug it out. It was quite rotted. The floors were rotted. Frame was solid still.
That's
but
lucky.
Dug it out, dragged it home, had the thing sitting, and it was an ugly car. Moss growing all over it. Looked like something right out of the woods, which it was.
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, yeah. It's sitting there in my driveway, and a buddy of mine swings by, and he's like, what are you... He's like, you have lost your mind. He's like, what are you getting yourself into? And this was the roughest...
I get that statement a lot.
Oh, yeah. This is one of the roughest ones I'd ever dragged home, So he looks at this thing, and he goes, this will never run again. And I says, yeah, it will. And he's like, no, it'll never run again. And I says, well, weekend after next is the car show uptown. So I'm going to drive it to the car show.
That's a pretty ominous task.
And he's like, never happened. He's like, bet you a case of beer it'll never happen. And
I love those bets.
Oh, yeah. And so I worked after work until probably 3 in the morning. You're a much younger man, much more stamina. Probably till 3 in the morning out there. New points, new distributor, or new points cap, rotor. Pulled all the plugs out, put a little bit of oil in all the cylinders. That's a good thing.
That's one trick I learned when I used to work at a. So you know about the one auto parts chain I worked at. I worked at another one for a short time before that. A lot of older guys behind the counter. Mm-hmm. Very, very knowledgeable. I mean, they've forgotten more than I'll ever know, I'm sure. And I was telling them about the Commando back then, actually. This before I had it. My grandpa was still around. And he said, if you're going to mess with it, first and foremost, pull all the plugs. Put the Marvel Mystery Oil was the brand he recommended in the cylinders and let it sit for a couple days. Then start messing with trying to turn it over.
Kerosene works too, but Marvel is pretty good. Yeah. That's a good way of getting an unseized an engine unseized.
So, anyways, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's all right. So that's what I did. I did that. The carburetor was completely gummed up with old, nasty fuel. So I got a carb rebuild kit for it. Went through the carb. Mm-hmm. Brake lines, fuel lines were all rotted completely off.
Yeah.
Ran new brake lines, ran new fuel lines. Then I found out that the gas tank was not only had pinholes in it, but it was full of old, varnished, nasty gas. Mm-hmm. So my first, I was a young kid, young man, cheap at the time, didn't really know what I was doing. I clean up the outside of it, power wash the outside of this tank, and at first to me, I'm like, all right, it's got a rust hole in the top of it, but the rest of it seems like it's okay. So I rinsed it out as good as I could with this rust hole in the top of it. Mm-hmm. I still didn't really know what I was going to do. Took it out to the farm. And I said, I got to get all this varnished, nasty stuff out of it. How the heck am I going to do this? And for whatever reason, the best idea that I had was to light it on fire.
I love it.
That thing burned for about 6 hours. Ooh. All of the junk on the inside of it. It was like a candle.
And the tank didn't fall apart or melt?
It did not. It was really weird, but it warped.
Lucky.
It did warp quite a bit. Yeah. So then it took all the ash and the soot and nastiness out of it, and then looked in there and saw all the pinholes and everything. I said, this thing's just not nice.
Shouldn't have done that. The varnish would have kept those holes plugged.
So I ended up ordering a gas tank from a classic Chevy place out west that had rust-free parts. Mm-hmm. Used parts, And this guy calls up, and he goes, we get talking from him. He's like, did you order this gas tank? Because I ordered it online. Mm-hmm. And he's like, did you order this tank? Yeah. And he's like, I don't know if I can ship there. And we're like, what do you mean you don't know if you can ship there? I'm like, because it's a gas tank? He's like, no, I ship gas tanks all the time. And I'm like, what's the issue then? And he's like, I've never shipped one out of country. And I'm like, I thought you're in Arizona. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, you're in China, right? And I'm like... They're like, no, I'm in East China, which is a township in Michigan. And we actually didn't live here at the time. Now I live in East China Township, but at the time, the email was through my mom's old work, which ended in East China. It was like something or other, blah, 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 East China Educate. I don't know, something like that.
Nice.
But, and the guy thought that we were Chinese.
That is awesome.
He's like, your English is really good.
That's amazing.
And so, and I've had that on Marketplace too, where I've tried to, I had a guy the other day that says, where are you located? And I says, East China. And he goes, it's going to take me a little while to get there. I'm in West Korea.
Okay.
And so I responded, okay. And then he comes back with, he's like, seriously, dude. And I'm like, seriously, what? And he's like, where you are? And I said, I'm in East China, Michigan. Mm-hmm. And then I get back, I thought you were screwing with me.
Wow. That's funny.
Yeah, so.
I mean, best I've been on that, I live in Memphis, Michigan. And I've been on the phone with a tech supporter ordering something like, so Memphis, Tennessee is the address? No, Memphis, Michigan.
Memphis, Michigan.
I didn't know there was a Memphis, Michigan. You have a really strong accent. I'm like, what? I do not.
So, the 51 Chevy, continued tinkering with it, finally got it fired up. It had very, very little compression. It was, it barely ran. Had to run, it was an automatic. It was an old Power Glide 2-speed automatic.
Bummer.
I know. And so I had to put external cooler on it because the original cooler was rotted out and it didn't work right for it. So did all that, but I got it to move under its own power, stop under its own power, and I drove it to that car show.
That's awesome. So what kind of beer did he get you?
I I want to say he never did, but in mine, I think actually he did. I think he showed by like a case of PBR or something at one point.
That's
But it was like, it took him like 6 months later or something. You know?
Aw, what the? That's
Yeah.
not cool.
He never doubted my mechanical abilities after that.
Yeah.
You know.
I had a buddy's dad. I did some welding for him, and it was a tractor exhaust, and it was rusty. And he says, "There's no way you can weld that." I says, "Yeah, there is.
Yeah,
There's
it's
no
weld
way.
the rust to the rust.
Just let me take it to my shop. I'll be back in an hour." Took it home, cleaned it up, welded it right up. I'd reversed the polarity on the MIG welder, and it just buzzed in all nice and beautiful. He's still using it to this day, and that was probably 8 years ago.
Hey, well, you can't beat that, man.
Nope.
Can't beat that. Well, producer Andrew's shaking his arm at us down there, which must mean that his arm's falling asleep because he's getting bored down there. No, I think it's break time, John.
Okay, we'll see in a bit.
Have you heard the good news? Now there's a local paper that people just can't seem to get enough of. It's the Thumbprint News. The Thumbprint News is free and full of interesting stories that focus on what's important in our lives. Stories that touch on this area's rich history, unique places, and the diverse cultures and people. You'll be in the know when you read the Thumbprint News. Go to thumbprintnews.com and read the paper online for free today.
I have an automotive story for you, John,
Okay.
that I think you'll really like because it kind of crosses over your love of the underwater, and it's a bit of a bringing a car back from the dead.
Well, I like it.
Okay. This is a recycled story. This is my grandfather who told me this story many times over the years, but he was quite proud of it. He had gone with a bunch of buddies of his up ice fishing on Hudson Bay. Mm-hmm. You know where that is? Northern Canada.
Yep.
This is back just before World War II.
Okay.
And so they had gone up there in a Ford Model A, and they had driven up there to go ice fishing. And they'd gone out, and they had driven out on the ice of Hudson Bay in a frozen area. And he said they were a couple miles offshore. That's what he said. Now, I mean, you could have been an old fisherman's tale, but he said they were a couple miles offshore. And he said the car started to bog down. And he's like, they're like, what the heck? And they look out, and it's kind of slushy.
Uh-oh.
Exactly.
Uh-oh.
So they bail out of the car and watch the car go boonk, through the ice.
Bummer.
So they're standing there on the side of the ice, and they're looking down through this crystal clear water, and the car's down there like 20 or 30 feet, just sitting on the bottom. And yeah. So he says they took some poles and stuff, and they stuck them right there, and they walked all the way back to whatever little town that they had left from, and, you know, went and found a garage somewhere and said, hey, our car is at the bottom of the Hudson Bay. I think it was the Hudson Bay. It was some bay up in Canada. Anyway, so it was a shallow bay, and it was, so it was about 30 feet of water. And they told us, is there any way we can get this thing out, you know? And the driver said, well, it's getting late. Why don't we try to do this tomorrow? You mark the spot, blah, blah, blah. So, okay. So they rode back out with the driver the next day, got all the way out there, found their poles. Those old guys, they know how to use compasses and all that. We'd be lost today. There's no way we'd never find it again. But,
No.
So
I mean, I can take a heading, but I can't navigate like that.
yeah. So they get back out there, and he's just completely frozen over at this point. And it had been real cold that night. And in fact, I think he said they had to wait a couple days for it to freeze over. That's what it was. It was getting colder or something, and so they did it on purpose. So they get out there, and he says they cut through the ice, big old handsaw, get everything cleared out. Sure enough, there's the car sitting there on the bottom.
Lucky.
So the driver fashions up some sort of hook and keeps fishing around, and finally gets the back bumper of this thing. Starts lifting up on it with some old wrecker, gets some planks, gets the car popped up out onto the ice. Let all the water flush out of the car, just runs all out of the doors and everything. And so they're formulating a plan at this point, and they've been out there, and his one buddy, just kind of being a smart ass, says, it'll still run. No, it's not going to run. It's been underwater for a couple of days. Oh, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Gets in the car and starts cranking this thing over and fires right up.
Wow. Wow.
Car fires right up. And they're just like, okay, he says, water's coming out of the exhaust.
Oh, yeah.
And he says the only thing he could figure was that it had a good enough seal on the gas cap.
Yeah.
On it, which on those, Model A's, most of them, the tank was the dashboard. So
yeah.
some of them were, the newer ones, 3031, they were under the seat in the back, I think, if I remember right. But and they had an updraft carburetor, though. So the engine was off when it went through, so it probably created a lock, an airlock. Yeah, and the engine itself stayed sealed.
That's lucky.
So they drove it back to the town and somehow put it in a garage or whatever, long enough to basically air out the interior and dry out the interior.
I would hope.
He said because it was just full of, it was freezing cold.
Oh, yeah.
So that when they finally got the thing to the point where they could actually ride in the car, they packed all their stuff back up and they drove it back to Michigan. Now, this is pre-World War II. Most people didn't keep their cars in garages. And he said the car drove the whole time back fine. No issues whatsoever.
Nice.
The very next day, finds out from his buddy, because it was his buddy's car, that he had gone out to move the car and it fired up, but it wouldn't move. And his differential and his transmission had cracked because all the water in them had frozen and split everything apart.
Oh, bummer.
So the engine was still good, but the and I don't he doesn't remember. I had asked him before, did the guy replace the engine and the transmission, or I mean the transmission and the rear axle, but yeah. So there's a story of saving something from the depths.
Awesome.
And I don't think modern cars would fire up as soon as you pulled them out of the water anymore.
No, the second you turn the key, it's probably going to short out all the electronics.
Yeah.
Again, furthermore reason why the nice old mechanical, solidly built, reliable vehicles are better. Mm-hmm. And I'll live by that. I will stand by that until the day that I can't drive them anymore.
Exactly.
And even then, I'll stand by it.
My grandfather was a very honest man, and he didn't really ever try to pull my leg. And I always kind of thought that maybe that story where he was pulling my leg. Well, I'm up in Grayling where he used to live a number of years ago, and I'm over at his house, and his phone rings one day, and some guy, my grandpa's like, "Oh, really?" And he's like, "Oh, how you been?" And they're talking back and forth, and he's like, "Yeah, let's do that." And he gets off the phone. He says, "We're going to lunch." Okay. Why are we going to lunch? And he's like, "Well, a friend of mine from about 60 years ago that I haven't seen is in town and wants to get lunch."
Okay. That's cool.
I'm like, okay. So we go down to the Big Boy, and there's this guy just as old as my grandpa. And we're sitting there having our lunch at the Big Boy, and they're telling stories back and forth. And his buddy goes, "Hey, you remember that time we put the Model A through the ice?" And he tells the same story my grandfather did. And I'm just like, oh my God. I'm like, it actually happened.
That's awesome.
That's pretty cool. He also told me a pretty funny story, which isn't a long story at all, but I guess they were out duck hunting once, and and a flock of ducks went by, and him and two of their buddies all stood up in the duck boat and fired at the same time, and that was enough force to flip the whole boat and them into the water.
I could see it.
So
that's funny.
But man, anything in 4x4 news? We didn't even do a 4x4 news section.
Nothing I can think of.
I actually saw something pretty cool the other day on Facebook, but I didn't. I should have saved the article or reshared it or something. Because I tried to find it again, but apparently there is an aftermarket company that is now offering what you and I have talked about before, which is essentially a crate motor for your rig that is a drop-in electric.
Huh.
So, instead of having if you're going to convert a vehicle to electric, instead of having to redesign the whole frame and a drivetrain and everything, this literally is like a crate motor that is an electric engine. But in the pictures, it looked like the outside of it was the same dimensions as like a small block Chevy.
Interesting.
And you can apparently drop this thing in and put your battery, and it looked like maybe even the battery pack. I didn't read the article. I didn't have much time to read it all. But it looks like maybe it has a battery pack on top of the engine, and you just drop it in and go electric.
Huh. I mean, no, but it's intriguing.
No.
No.
You don't want electric?
Nope.
Well, remember the Chevy Bolt we talked about, though? You can pay extra to get yourself the cord that you need to charge it?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah,
No.
I'm I'll stick with good old fossil fuel burning dinosaurs.
I saw that bolt again today at the same job site. I was back at that job site again.
Nice.
And I don't want to say it was a close call because it really wasn't, but I was texting back one of the guys that works with me. It's just some work stuff. And I'm walking across the parking lot and I'm texting it. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see this black car like hurtling at me. And I'm like, ah! And it silently, no noise whatsoever. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's
it's
unsettling.
it's the bolt.
Nice.
I mean, he wouldn't have hit me, and
Yeah.
he drove like 10 feet away from me. But just this car was coming
Yeah.
at, and then he comes over, he like waves the owner of it. It's like, hey, how you doing? Like, oh, okay, you know.
See, that would be another one of those, if I had something to swap that kind of engine or that setup into, I mean, I'm not going to buy the engine or motor swap or whatever you call that, but I'd do it if somebody sponsored it.
Oh, yeah, I
think
mean,
that would be interesting to do that. Take a gas there and convert it to electric like that. I think that might be kind of cool.
well, I mean, I told you about that Mercury I saw at SEMA that had the Tesla
think so.
drivetrain swapped in, the lowrider, and you're like, oh, you can't lower a car. It's wrong.
Yeah.
You did that on the podcast.
Yeah.
I still love
Hate
that
those
car.
things.
Teslas?
No, those are intriguing, but no lowered anything.
Oh, lowered
Hate it.
cars?
Yeah.
Certain cars,
I'll
certain
say
cars
this.
have the lines for it.
Yeah, I did see a pretty sweet rat rod project. It was a TJ Wrangler base with a Cummins diesel that was just dropped all the way down and elongated. That was actually pretty sweet.
Hey, I think I might have seen that one. That's pretty cool.
That was cool.
That's pretty cool.
That reminded me of like some old Mad Max stuff or something.
I saw pictures of. I haven't seen it in person, but I saw the red Chevy truck, just like the one your dad has. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you took and drew a line around the center of the body, so like a foot below the door handles,
Okay.
and you cut all of the lower metal off,
Okay.
and then just set the upper half on the ground.
Okay.
That's what this was. That's what they had done. They
Why?
had removed like a foot and a half of the lower part of the body to make it so super low. Like it was like 2 feet off the ground. Custom chassis,
Yep, I'm out.
everything. Well, I looked at it and I go, well, he probably had a Michigan truck and he's cut all the rust away.
Or it just fell off.
I just cut all the rust off the bottom 2 feet of the vehicle.
That's
and
awesome.
Made himself. It's pretty.
No, so I think we should
interesting.
backtrack a little bit. We were talking about bringing rigs back from the dead.
Okay.
We glossed over a few things. Check your tires, your brakes. You
Sure.
mentioned brake lines, fuel lines, carburetor. What other things? Of course, get a little oil in the engine, let it soak.
Okay. Well, yeah, going like I said, going through your mechanicals of your carburetor and like all those types of things too.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to bring a fuel injected vehicle back from the dead, it's a little more difficult. You may
Yeah.
have to be putting injectors in it.
You got to flush those lines out.
Also, keep in mind that the first fuel injected or first electronic fuel injected vehicles of the 80s and early 90s, vast majority of them, and this is going to sound like a minor thing, but if you put a battery in it when the key is in the on position, will cook the computer.
I believe it.
You need to make sure the key is in the off position before you put a battery in it. I made that mistake before. Hooking up a battery, I'm thinking, well, there's, vehicle's dead, whatever. Didn't realize the ignition, and I think that was in a late 80s GMC, if I remember right. And, the key was in the on position, and I threw a battery in it, and I think I might have even heard like a fuse pop or something, but it was actually the TBI computer.
Nice.
And I got talking to a guy, a friend of mine that runs a wrecking yard, and he said that it doesn't always happen, so it's not like it's guaranteed to happen.
Yeah.
He said, but pretty much a lot of those early, especially GM computers, will do that.
Interesting.
Yeah. So just
what
make
the
sure
cause of that was.
Make sure your key's off, before you put the battery in.
I'll say another, probably two big things that are often overlooked with that, oil change.
Sure.
A lot of times when oil sits, it will hold moisture, and that's not good. And I'd say probably the number one, and this was something when I first started looking into redoing the Commando, I never took this into account. It's kind of a twofer. One, belts.
Yeah. Belts.
Two, coolant.
Well,
A lot of times the coolant, you get a hose that rots out, it all drains out. And if you're not careful, you start that up thinking there's coolant in it. You get a few minutes, and then you just toasted the engine.
Also, after it's running for the first time in a number of years, take a look at everything on the engine as it's running.
Yeah.
Because I've had water pumps where the bearings were so bad in them with rust that the water pump has gone bad within 5 minutes of running.
Oh, I believe it.
Or
power steering even.
We're missing a really, really important one.
We are?
We are. Check your air cleaner.
Oh, yeah.
Rodents, mice,
mice
all that.
love to make nests out of those air boxes. Oh, my God.
That Samurai had where the guy got decapitated in it. Ran good, but it was always gutless. It was gutless. And I would drive it around town and it was fine. I mean, it just didn't seem to have a lot of power. And I always thought, well, it's probably...
It's tired or worn.
Well, yeah, it was a little more tired than, say, a carbureted Samurai. This was a fuel-injected one. And I had a couple guys tell me the fuel-injected ones had more pep. They were like 30 more horsepower or something. I'm like, this sure doesn't feel like it. I'm like,
yeah.
Well, I'm driving to work one day in the Samurai in the middle of summer, no top, no doors on it, just driving. And I'd owned this thing, and I had checked the air cleaner, mind you. And I'd owned this thing for... at this point, maybe 4 months, and all of a sudden, the throttle sticks on it.
Huh.
And it's just, and it wasn't like a fast throttle stick, like it wasn't like a car out of control or anything, but it just sticks. I'm like pumping on the gas pedal. I'm like, all right, whatever.
It used to happen in Project XJ before the remodel.
Okay, so I pushed the clutch in, shut off the engine, coast to the side of the road. I'm like, well, maybe the throttle, maybe the TBI or the the valve on the throttle body stuck or something. So I take off the air cleaner, start looking down the tubes and all that, pop off the tube from the TBI, and a chewed up, full of mouse poop and stuff shop rag was jammed into the TBI. So this mouse or something had taken it into the tube. And I'd never looked down the tube between the air cleaner and the TBI, and it had always been in there. So I pull the thing out, fire it back up. It was like I just tripled the horsepower. So I was like back up to the original 62 horsepower or whatever it was.
Nice.
But I couldn't believe it. It's like this little shop rag had been in there.
Yeah. Huh.
I just did that on a boat motor the other day that we sold, an old parts boat motor, our dad's. We pulled the top of it off. And it was completely packed with like cotton from the seat of a car or something. I believe it. It was just packed.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So, yeah, check your air cleaner, check all that. Check
and
around.
The tube. Any piping to do with your air intake, check it, blow it out. Make sure it's free of debris.
Also prepare to be surprised. I bought a 55 Chevy once that ran poorly, but I bought this 55 Chevy. I am driving down the road in this thing, driving home, probably 30 miles, and I'm almost home, and all of a sudden, a mouse comes running out of one of the vents on the dashboard, runs across the dashboard, and goes down inside one of the other vents.
Well, okay then.
So, you might have passengers in the vehicle you just brought back to life, too.
Yeah.
So, car had been sitting for a number of years.
Something to be cautious of. Me personally, as you know, I am terrified of spiders. And when I first got actually Pegasus, she'd been sitting for a year. And I, for some reason, those little black jumping spiders that twitch like they're on crack?
Yes.
Yeah. Every day I went out, there were at least 3 of them in the driver window.
Ugh.
I think they had nested in there or something. And it just, for about a month and a half of driving the thing, every day I was killing at least 1 or 2. Freaked me out, man. I'm shaking thinking about it. That's my biggest fear in working around or moving old cars is big spiders.
Well, there's a lot of them, I'm sure. Wasps, spiders, all that.
I don't care about anything but spiders.
Okay.
It's just I'm terrified of them. I don't know why.
Huh.
Just can't. Don't do them.
I think people on 4x4 Talk need to send Johnny Orange. Tag Johnny Orange and some pictures of some really good spiders. Absolutely. The electrical on your vehicles. If you're bringing this old vehicle back from the dead, look at all the wiring, especially under the hood, by the battery.
That's a good one. At least a general overlook. You're not going to be able to check everything, but in particular, any of your ignition wires. So anything your cables to and from your batteries and your starters. Mm-hmm. Number one. You get one of those, a mouse decided to chew through it, you start it up, now you move the vehicle, swings over, grounds out, you're going to blow something.
Yeah. I've had a number of those over the years that have arced out and done stuff. I had a mouse in an old Chevy of mine that car caught on fire because of it.
I'll believe it.
So.
I believe it.
John, you got anything else, buddy?
I don't think so at the moment. I mean, we could keep going all day with the weird stories, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, okay. So, folks, happy Halloween.
Have a good one this week. We're going to go grab some more coffee and this fine Monday morning and see what the rest of the day brings.
Yep. All right. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Thanks for listening and have a good one, everybody.